Hello Kitty, me gusta mi titties, me gusta mi booty, invito una selfie con filtro Hello Kitty.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Dangerous Games Podcast for season 2.
Two.
Yes, 2, season 2, episode 2. So 2. I am your host, Courtney, with Reckless Cards, and my beautiful, stunning, perfect, wonderful, gorgeous, glamorous, most wonderful person I know, Sarah from Mrs. Squirt's Cards, is my co-host. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I am the dandy, I guess. I can't even speak. I'm so dandy.
You're so dandy, you can't
And
even.
so dandy.
So
Actually, I just got a shiver. It's freaking cold down here now. I don't know why.
it's like, so it's very late. We're in 2 separate states, so it's like 2 hours earlier. By me, it's like, it's got to be like 11 p.m. So I set my heat to turn like all the way down to like 64 at nighttime because I'm not paying for it. I'm like, get a blanket, wear some pajamas, you're fine.
Right.
So, but I'm sitting in my office now, freezing my butt off because of my own
That's how I am too.
unwillingness to turn on the heat in my house.
Exactly. I just as you're introducing me, I had like a shiver because I was just like, dang, I don't know what happened. It just got cold all of a sudden.
Oh, it's because we're going to be talking about Randall Woodfield today, and he is.
Oh,
We're going to talk about getting chills. It is.
this gross guy again.
Well, we have to do part 2.
I know.
I know everyone's probably like, part 1, he did commit some crimes. He did go to prison. He did, get out of prison. And it was
He
kind
might
of
be going back.
maybe. Well, I mean, I spoiled it and said that he was going back. But he does so many terrible things. I'm just going to I feel like, first of all, I want to say this is a really hard episode. Like last episode was bad. This one's worse. There is children involved. There is a lot of sexual assault. There is like a little bit of talk of like graphic sexual assault. So if this is not for you, please just skip this episode and move on.
Just know he gets caught and he's in jail.
Caught.
Like if
He does.
if you're wanting to know.
He gets caught. He continues to be. They continue to wrap cases up that he was. He killed these people, and
Yep.
he does get, linked to them as technology advances. But if you don't want to listen to this, I totally understand. I felt like it was really important because it is. We are going to cover some really horrible things in this episode. So, with that being said, I'm going to start. So we ended part 1 talking about Randall getting out of prison after only serving 4 years of his 10-year sentence for the armed robberies and sexual assaults he committed in Oregon. He was about to embark on a more terrifying crime spree. On October 11th of 1980, 29-year-old Sherry Lynn Ayers, who had gone to school with Woodfield in Newport from 2nd grade all the way through high school, and when he was serving time in prison, he had written letters to her and she wrote him back. She was found by her fiance, bludgeoned and stabbed in the head and neck to death in her apartment. Ayers had attended Oregon State University and graduated from the University of Oregon's X-ray technician course. At the time of her death, she was a full-time employee at the Metropolitan Clinic in Portland and worked part-time in what was then the Dwyer Hospital in Milwaukee, now Milwaukee, Oregon, not Wisconsin. Her family suspected Woodfield, and he was questioned by investigators, but he refused to take a polygraph and appeared to be evasive and shifty to the detective. DNA evidence from the semen found on Sherry did not match Woodfield. Now, again,
different technology.
Yes, they let him go. But remember, this was 1980, and the DNA evidence will come back later. But at this time, the DNA evidence of now would seem like science fiction to detectives in 1980.
For sure.
This is like 40 years ago at this point. So that was in October. Now on Thanksgiving Day, so a month later, in 1980, 22-year-old Darcy Fix was shot to death in her home. It is believed that Woodfield broke into her home planning on assaulting her, but Unfortunately, 24-year-old Doug Altig was also there. Woodfield ended up binding and killing both of these young people execution style. And since Fix's 32 caliber gun was missing, it was surmised he killed her with her own weapon. The couple had been childhood neighbors and sweethearts. Sadly, Fix only knew Woodfield because she was briefly involved with his best friend in college. So you know how high school sweethearts, they break up, they go to college. She like had a little fling with someone Woodfield knows, so she came into his circle.
Oh my god.
And then her and Altig got back together. He was still in college, and Fix was an up and coming manager in training at the First State Bank of Oregon. Their friends and family said that they were deeply in love and excitedly planning their future together. When they didn't arrive for Thanksgiving at their family's home that day, for the meal, Darcy's father went looking for her
Oh
to
Lord.
her house, and that's where he found the horrific scene. Woodfield was once again questioned about this double homicide, as he again had a connection to the victim, coupled with his horribly violent history, but ultimately they did not have enough evidence to hold him. So he walked away again. So this is 3 murders,
Jesus.
2 women that he knew. Woodfield's criminal activities extended beyond the heinous acts of sexual assault and murder, though. He also carried out more armed robberies targeting small businesses along the I-5 corridor. So while he was like murdering and sexually assaulting people, he was also driving up and down I-5 and breaking into businesses and robbing them. And he
He
would
needed his money somehow.
he would also, though, sexually assault women in these businesses when he went in to, steal the money. So he'd go in, he would rape women and steal all the money in the register. But when he would break into businesses, he never like killed anyone. He would just assault them and leave. But when
Which
he
is
would break into
worse.
people's houses or women that he knew like personally, he would kill. Following the murders, I mean, imagine like it's bad enough to have been assaulted by him, but like then finding out that he was a serial killer and like you survived that. That had
Yeah.
to be, I can't
Mm-mm.
imagine. Following the murders of Fix and Altig, Woodfield embarked on a spree of robberies across the Pacific Northwest. On December 9th, so that was Thanksgiving, so end of, third Thursday of
Yep.
November. Now we're December 9th, like just past the first week of December. Donning a fake beard, he held up a gas station in Vancouver, Washington, brandishing a firearm. 4 nights later, on December 13th, he targeted an ice cream parlor in Eugene, Oregon. Then on December 14th, the next day, he struck a drive-in restaurant in Albany. During these robberies, Woodfield was sometimes wore what appeared to be a Band-Aid or athletic tape on his nose. He said eventually, and I'll share this, like they did like all of these like artist sketches of like what the victim said. They're so crazy looking, but he would have like a bandage on his nose because he said he thought that would like make them not recognize him.
Jesus.
So like nasal strips like worn by athletes. That kind of.
Mm-hmm.
On December 21st, so it's like, less than 2 weeks later, still wearing a false beard, he assaulted a waitress in Seattle, forcing her at gunpoint to perform a sexual act in a restaurant restroom. So it is nonstop. He does not have a cooling off period. He just goes. And it's like he does all these like rapes and assaults and robberies, and he doesn't kill anyone. And then he escalates to the point of like, he's going to kill someone.
It's so crazy. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Despite attempts to disguise himself with bandages, fake beards, or hooded sweatshirts, witnesses consistently described a man around 6 feet tall with brown curly hair and dark eyes. Since his tactics were always the same, it earned him the moniker the I-5 Bandit. So now they're not linking the murders and the like robberies at this point. So the I-5 Bandit from the press, as his crimes left a trail of fear and devastation. On January 14th, so just a few weeks later,
Yeah.
a man matching the description of the I-5 Bandit and wearing a false beard invaded a home occupied by 2 sisters. So this is the trigger warning. These little girls were 8 and 10 years old. And he sexually assaulted them. He did not kill them. but they were little babies. The longer he was able to get away with these, the bolder he became. A lot of serial killers have a cooling off period, but Woodfield does not seem to have one. There were barely days in between his attacks. Around 9 o'clock on the evening of January 18th, so this is 4 days later, 20-year-old Sherry Hull was finishing her Sunday night shift cleaning the Transamerica office building in Kaiser, Oregon. Somehow, a man gained entry to the building and grabbed her. Taking control of Hull with one hand and brandishing a gun with the other, he led her down the corridor where they encountered another cleaner, the 20-year-old Lisa Garcia. The assailant forced both women into a secluded room, ordering them to the ground. Following a sexual assault, he proceeded to shoot each of them in the back of the head. A pattern consistent with his operations that he's been doing. Like, it's always like very execution style. He does sometimes beat them or stab them, but most of the time he just shoots them, especially since he got the gun. Sexual violence followed by a .32 caliber bullet to the skull. While Hull succumbed to her injuries, Garcia managed to survive by pretending to be dead, lying motionless with bullets lodged in the back of her skull until her attacker departed. When I tell you Lisa Garcia is probably one of the strongest and most amazing women ever,
That's crazy.
you're going to see. She waited for him to leave, and then she contacted the police. Lisa managed to describe her attacker as notably attractive, standing about 6 feet tall with a cascade of thick curly brown hair and matching eyes, clad in jeans and a leather jacket. During the officer's response, one of them spotted a robust man matching the assailant's description at an intersection, but it was over a mile away from the scene of the attack. And the officer thought that it was completely improbable for someone to have gotten that far that quickly. So they just continued driving. And most people think that that was, in fact, him because he was incredibly fast and athletic. So he slipped out of the grasp again of the police.
Wow.
So on January 26th and 29th, he traveled to Southern Oregon and committed robberies in Eugene, Medford, and Grants Pass. So he just killed people. He thought he killed 2 women. And now he is traveling south again, and he committed 3 more robberies. In the latter location, 2 females, a clerk and a customer, were assaulted by him.
Jesus.
Randall did not take rejection well. So a lot of this, people, like, investigators have speculated now, like in retrospect, like he'd get agitated. He'd call someone like, hey, you want to hook up? Because he had girlfriends. People, like I said, he could be charming. And when they rejected him, he would like freak out. And that would be like the switch that would flip.
The trigger.
Yes.
Yep.
Police would later link several incidents that they feel triggered Woodfield into these manic rages. He was objectively good looking, and while he had a tendency to be awkward, he was able to be charming when it suited him. He would get girls' numbers and call them up as he coasted up and down I-5. Occasionally, they would turn him down, and he would fly into a murderous rage. His sister recalled that in February of 1981, he had called her up in California and asked to get coffee. Her husband said, no, I don't want Randall around. He didn't like him. He didn't trust him. And later that day, Woodfield would strike again. 37-year-old Donna Eckerd and her 14-year-old daughter, Jeanette Jarvis, would be sexually assaulted and murdered on February 3rd, 1981 in Mountain Gate, California. Donna was a loving mother of 3 and a wife. She was an RN at the Mercy Medical Center in Redding. She was a wonderful nurse and very well liked by everyone. She was very well respected and an educator, shaping the minds of young future nurses in Northern California. Literally the night before her murder, she was at the hospital setting up a class for the next day where she was going to teach. She was remarried to Stephen Eckert, who was a firefighter and the stepfather to her 3 daughters, one of which had the tragic horror of discovering her mother and sister's bodies after returning home from a ball game that evening. Janelle was a 9th grader at Nova High in Redding. Everyone who knew her said she was so happy and bubbly, an amazing student, and a member of the girls' basketball team. 14 years old. He is an absolute absolute monster.
He doesn't care.
No.
Mm-mm.
The relentless string of crimes were not over, and Woodfield was showing no signs of slowing. On the same day that he killed the mother and daughter in Reading, another horrifying incident unfolded as a female store clerk was abducted and sexually assaulted during the robbery. So he murdered and killed Donna and Janelle. Then later that day went and abducted a clerk and sexually assaulted her.
Mm.
The pattern continued with an identical crime reported in Eureka, California on February 4th. So the next day, he did the same thing. So this is just like, that's 4 women in 2 days, 2 of which, well,
Wow.
3 women and a child, 2 of which he killed. Where the same assailant robbed a motel in Ashland, Oregon later that night. So another robbery later that night.
Jesus.
5 days later, in Corvallis, a man resembling the description of the I-5 bandit perpetrated a robbery at a fabric store. During that robbery, he molested both the clerk and a customer before. So 5 more days later, 2 more women. Then on February 12th, 1981, a series of robberies were carried out by an individual matching the description of the I-5 bandit in Vancouver, Olympia, and Bellevue, Washington. Shockingly, the incidents in Olympia and Bellevue also involved 3 more sexual assaults.
Lord have mercy. Wow.
So that was February 12th. Okay. So Julie Ritz was an 18-year-old girl who, by all accounts, was fun-loving. She had met Woodfield when he was a bouncer for the Faucet. Woodfield would consistently allow pretty young girls into the club without verifying their age.
Mm.
Julie was one of these girls. On the night of February 14th, 1981, Woodfield planned a party at the downtown Marriott in Portland. No one showed. No one came to his party.
Oh,
And
God.
to perform, Randy was angry and embarrassed. He reached to Reitz and showed up at her home at 2 a.m. By now, people were recognizing that there was something really terrible going on, and Candy Wilson, Julie's mother, begged her to be safe because there was a killer out there. Julie was sexually assaulted and murdered in the late hours of February 14th or the early morning hours of the 15th. It was clear to investigators that Julie knew her murderer, as there were glasses of wine out and she had started making coffee. Her mother found her body at 8:30 a.m. on the 15th, a kettle of water burning all the way down on the stove.
Jeez Louise.
So she invited that man into her house, and probably he thought he was going to get lucky. And she was like, yeah, you're 30 and I'm 18, and like, you just showed up here. So I'm not like, we can have a glass of wine and some coffee and you can go. And he was like, yeah, that's not what's going to happen.
Mm.
So a former friend named Chuck Heath, a former friend of Woodfield's named Chuck Heath, said that the last time he ever spoke to Randall was the night of the party. He had gotten a message late. Like, and by the time he got the message, the party was like over, but it had never happened. So he didn't go. He worked with Randall at the Faucet and was one of the people who linked Woodfield to Reitz. This is what finally made police feel they had enough to get Woodfield. He had connections to so many of the women that had been murdered, but they didn't act quickly enough, and he struck 3 more times.
Whoa.
In Eugene on February 18th and 21st, and with another sexual assault in Corvallis on February 25th. But detectives were hot on his trail. The downfall of the I-5 killer came swiftly and with little fanfare. Detective Dave Komanek, working the Marion County Sheriff's Office, where one of the murders had occurred, led the investigation. He had his eyes on a suspect early, Randall, who had a history of preying on women and was acquainted with several of the victims, and his modus operandi was the same as like the robberies that he had committed to go to prison. Woodfield also had familiarity with the I-5 corridor and matched description provided by witnesses. Marion County detectives compiled a call log showing Woodfield using calling cards near various murder scenes, ironically leading to his downfall partly through phone records. After Lisa Garcia, remember Lisa Garcia, she's the one who survived, identified Woodfield in a lineup, police interrogated him on March 5th, 1981. A search of his residence in Springfield, Oregon, where he rented a room, uncovered significant evidence. The same brand of tape used to bind the victims, a .32 caliber bullet in Woodfield's racquetball bag. 4 days later, he was charged with the murder of Sherry Hall.
Wow.
The attempted murder of Lisa Garcia, and sodomy. Despite pleading not guilty with a public defender, indictments from various jurisdictions in Washington and Oregon started to pile up, including multiple counts of murder, rape, sodomy, attempted kidnapping, armed robbery, and firearm possession by an ex-convict. So he's just having the book thrown at him at this point. During Woodfield's trial in the summer of 1981, Marion County prosecutor Chris Van Dyke, who was like, this was his first case ever, characterized him as arrogant, cold, and unemotional. Backed by overwhelming evidence, Woodfield's defense primarily relied on mistaken identity. They're like, wasn't me, wasn't our guy. The people are just mixing him up. He's a guy. You know, I know that he did these other things that he admitted to and was convicted of that were very similar to this. And he just like, you know, victims were like, that was him, but it wasn't him.
Jesus.
They even suggested that Garcia's identification was influenced by hypnosis. Like she was hypnotized into believing.
Oh, right. Totally. Yep. Makes sense.
When Woodfield, and this is rare, he took the stand in his own case. You know,
yeah, that's very rare. Mm-hmm.
He appeared far from the muscular athlete or charming figure depicted in the media, admitting to owning a .32 caliber pistol, but claiming to have disposed of it when he learned it violated his parole. He was like, yeah, I had a gun like that, but, you know, I'm such a good citizen that when I realized that I wasn't allowed to have it, I got rid of it, you know.
Oh, yeah, because that's what happens with criminals. They just, you know, oh, I'm going to obey the law.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Our girl, Lisa Garcia, this absolute pillar of a woman, this amazing woman, her testimony was crucial, recalling that terrifying night in the office building months earlier. Her testimony was so heart-wrenching and horrible and just traumatic to listen to. But she got up there and she did it. And she was like, this man is going to prison. The jury deliberated for only 3.5 hours before reaching a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Everything.
Good.
There was no death penalty in Oregon.
Mm-mm.
So Woodfield received he was then 30 years old. He received a life sentence plus 90 years.
Yeah.
In December of that year, he received an additional 35 years for sodomy and a weapons charge related to another attack, one in California.
Yep.
District attorneys along the I-5 corridor now faced a daunting decision regarding further prosecution of Randall Woodfield. Despite the possibility of, you know, securing more convictions, the practicality, and again, this was the 70s, of, you know, all of these lengthy trials was called into question. He already had an insane sentence. Like it was like life plus 90 plus 35. And so they were like, he was guaranteed that he was going to die in prison. And they felt like pursuing additional trials would not only drain valuable resources from prosecutors' office going after people who were not already incarcerated and who were committing crimes.
Right.
Somebody who already hadn't been sentenced to, you know, the rest of their life in prison. But it would also subject the victims' families to further anguish and trauma.
Yeah.
So even in California, where Woodfield faced accusations of killing a mother and her daughter, the local prosecutors ultimately opted against pursuing charges. The potential imposition of the death penalty, while an option in California, which is crazy in the 70s, like no death penalty in Oregon, but death penalty in California. That's crazy.
They're all connected too nowadays, you know.
Yeah. It did not outweigh the logistical challenges and emotional toll of trials.
Yeah.
However, despite his incarceration, the list of his victims continues to grow. In 2012, detectives from the Portland Police Bureau Cold Case Unit announced a breakthrough. Utilizing new magnetic bead technology at the Oregon State Police Crime Lab, they were able to match Woodfield's DNA to evidence from 5 additional victims.
Jeez.
Hicks, Jarvis, Eckerd, Atlig, and Reitz. So all of the people that I talked about. There are up to 44 other victims that they think that he is connected to,
Right.
but they haven't been able to definitively link him to them yet. So I just think it's a matter of time, and there will be more people that continue to get added to this list. There's over 300 unsolved crimes along the I-5 corridor, murders specifically, and they think that he had a part in several of them. They just have to, get
Wow.
it. In July of 2005, former Portland lieutenant and cold case supervisor Weatherroy confronted Woodfield about his potential involvement in unsolved crimes. Despite the mounting DNA evidence, so this is like a few years before the DNA evidence came out, like this detective took it upon himself to go in there and be like, hey, we're going to prove that you did this. Do you want to just admit it so we can, give these families some closure? During their encounter at the Justice Building in downtown Portland, Woodfield presented a facade of charm and charisma. Weatherroy recalled Woodfield's impeccable appearance, from his perfectly coiffed hair to his manicured nails, which were a stark contrast to the sinister nature of his crimes. He's so arrogant and full of himself. Still, Woodfield's ability to manipulate and deceive, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, further underscored the chilling depth of his depravity. Ultimately, all of the jurisdictions decided to keep the cases open in the highly unlikely event that Woodfield is ever paroled. It also keeps them open as cold case files so that they can continue DNA evidence and like technology advances. They can keep running these, things through and hopefully potentially get a match for him. Because he refuses to admit that he did any of this. But they will keep this stuff open in the event that he ever gets paroled, that they're like, no, which he won't, but just for the sake of the families, that they don't have to worry about him getting out. Because I firmly believe that he would just, like, to this day, do you know how he spends his days? He tries to flirt with the female security guards because he is a disgusting pig.
Is he at Oregon State Penitentiary?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Salem.
So
that's the hospital, but
he is there for the rest of his life.
Good. As he should be.
Yeah. But it's so, like, the fact that he will not admit to this and that he still, like, cares about what he looks like, and he tries to flirt with the guards. Like, the guards say it's so gross. They're so disgusted by the fact that this, like, heinous man thinks that, like, anyone would be interested in him.
I find it, like, it's very common for murderers to not give up the information, even if they have 10 or 15 death penalties against them.
They're re-victimizing the
exactly, and they're not giving you what you want. It's like it's a game. It's a cat and mouse game with them. A lot of them, at least, and so it doesn't surprise me, because by him telling that, it's not going to help him. He's not getting out. It's just going to add another tick mark by his name and associate him with somebody else. But it's like, this is where it's like really disgusting if you think about a serial killer, because you could literally just allow these people to freaking mourn, and like have closure. And yet you're just still dangling it, and you have complete control. And it's just gross.
They like to have control, and men like him who felt like all of these women had control over him, now he's in control over their story.
Yep.
But then on the flip side, you have the ones who just like want to tell you the whole story. They like claim that they killed people that they actually didn't. They want to be this like imposing figure, and those men are the opposite. They're like super weak, and they want to seem stronger and more powerful, so they're just out here claiming things that they didn't even do. Inside the mind of these people that do this, to me, is so, because they in some ways they're so similar, and then in other ways they're just so different. And you never know what it is inside of their mind that makes them behave this way.
And they can be, there's a lot of people who, like you said, perfect life growing up.
BTK, like his whole family had no idea. and he was like out killing people, and he had a wife and a daughter.
How, I mean,
No idea.
and it just makes you think like people you surround yourself with too. It's just like, um, I'm very private and very protective of my family because of things like this, and it's not like this person in general. It's just it's reality. We don't know who we have in our inner circles anymore, and to trust is very hard to do nowadays. And so this is really disgusting in the fact that he targeted people who could trust him or did trust him or
Knew
felt
him.
yes, and you
The
target
boldness
them.
is that.
That shows weakness too because it's an easy prey. Not saying that it's better, but it's like
Well, they're gonna let him
you
in the house. They're gonna
right.
trust him. They're gonna turn their back on him.
Yep. There's less work needed. So it's not he doesn't have to work so hard to get their attention to allow them to believe him
He can
because they believe
access
him
to them.
already.
Yeah,
Yep. It's gross. It's
yeah.
really gross.
The fact that so many of the women that he murdered were women that he personally knew, and it went on as long as it did. That's what kills me. It's like this guy had this history, and then all of these women that he was killing knew him. And it took all the way to the like 18-year-old girl who he would let go into the bar. And like some other guy that worked at the bar was like, yeah, he used to let girls go into the bar all the time, even though they weren't old enough to be in there. For them to be like, oh, he knew this girl too.
It just makes you realize like how grateful we are to have the technology we do have. Because yeah, back then it was very easy. You could literally get away with murder, and a lot of people have. I know a lot of those. You said that a lot of there's I-5 unsolved murders. I know that the Green River Killer is also um, tied to a lot of those that have been. He's another guy who just um, won't give up information. I know that. So I actually worked an evidence search for Green River when I was in high school when I did search and rescue for the county, and I can talk about it now because it's been years, but um, we were searching in an area in a location that had flooded in 1990 in the flood of 94, 96. I can't remember. And so we were looking at it, and the only reason why he agreed to like even say, "Hey, yeah, it was in this general area. It's all um, big buildings nowadays, but there's a ravine there, and that's what we did evidence searching on." And he's like, "If you give me my favorite meal." It's never like if hey, I want to help this family have closure. It's what are you going to give me for the
What do I
information
get
I
out of
have?
this? Yeah.
And he's basically dangled the carrot in front of officers about actually a lot of those unsolved mysteries on the I-5 because he was also part of a spree up and down the I-5 as well, mainly in Washington, but he did dial a lot. Actually, I think he went as far down as Salem,
Yeah.
and so it's just disgusting. You made the comment, "Why is there so many on the West Coast?" I think it's really just the accessibility, and I think there's a lot more
Wild terrain.
victims. There's more victims too. If you want to get bigger cities or on the coasts, and I think it's just easier for prey. There's not a whole lot to do in Iowa or you know Missouri and whatnot, probably back in that time. But
When you cruise
it's
down the coast, and you go from like a big city to like a smaller town, but you
yep,
have this big highway that kind of connects them, and it like
yes,
you have the accessibility, you have the opportunity, you have people that you go from a big city to a like big city, but those small towns in between, people are more trusting. They don't think that's going to happen to them.
it's very true, especially during that time. I think everybody kind of trusted everybody. It's a very common like demeanor. And then these little cities you're talking about, Ashland and Medford and Reading, and those are all at the border of California, and Eureka in California is also very small. They're small now, well, smaller, I should say. So you
Yeah.
can only imagine how small they were back
Right,
in
they
the
came, like,
80s.
in these people's homes too.
I
Like
just
he was
can't.
like picking up hitchhikers. He was going into their homes and
Yeah, it's a very, preyish behavior. It
well,
is literally stalking your prey.
like he won't admit that he did it. So like, Donna and her daughter, did he like see them at a store and follow them home? Like
Yeah,
how did like Sherry Hall, what made him go into that office building? Like how did he
right.
know that they were in there?
Yep.
Was he following them before he killed them? Did he have an interaction with them somewhere and he was just like, oh, this is who it is? Like why them? And like you get the ones like unfortunately Julie and
Right.
Carol and the women that he knew,
New.
like
Hmm.
Darcy, why, unfortunately, because they came into
His circle.
his circle.
His.
They
Yep.
came near him. They were on his radar just by proximity at this point.
Correct.
But and Cheryl was nice to him. That's what she was like, nice to him, and he killed her for it.
She
Julie,
was the one that wrote him when he
when he was
was
in,
in
yeah,
prison.
they knew
Yeah,
each other since they were kids. And
and
Julie, like, his party was a bummer, and she invited him over. She let him come in and have a glass of wine because he was feeling sorry for himself because nobody showed up to his party. She was nice to him.
I think that the niceness he sees as weakness though in women, because and it's such a only reason why I say that's because like I do read a lot of psychopaths and like murderers and stuff like that, and um not a whole lot recently, but you realize that they really are just messed up. They really, a woman is kind to them and they're upset about it, but in real true fashion, if a woman was kind to a man, like he would be loving it. Like that would be something amazing. And I feel like these serial killers, it's like, oh, does it make the man weak because a woman is being nice to them, and so they have to like assert dominance and like be like, hey, yeah, no, like no, I'm alpha in this
You're gonna
equation.
defer
And
to me. And also with him too, some of it could just be like they were nice to him, and niceness equates to they should have sex with him if he wants to have sex with them. And if they turn him down or he feels rejected
yeah,
in any way, he gets mad and then he harms them and kills them. And like he's
that's
like,
just
"Oh, you're not gonna give it to me freely. I'm gonna take it and then I'm gonna kill you."
that's how like, and that's what's really scary. We both have kids, and both have girls, and I think that's what really scares me about my kids growing up is like the masks people can wear nowadays and they can hide behind, and just like just digging into these cases, you really realize that, like, man, we got lucky and survived the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. But it's like, it's crazy to even think that way. But like how bad it was. And nowadays it's even worse with technology. Technology is good and it's also bad. But it makes me very fearful of my kids
Jeremy
getting
was
older.
actually making fun of me because I have the kids on like that Life 360. He's like, "You're so obsessed." He's like, I'm like, I need to know where they're at. I need to know they're okay, like all the time. Amelia's out, she's a teenager. She does her
Yep.
teenager thing. And I need to know where she is and that she said she's going to where she said she was going. Because I
Right.
know when I was a teenager, I tell my mom I'm going here and then I'd be over here
I
because
hear you.
it's so.
But the world back then is you could say you're going there and be okay at the other place. Nowadays, it's like if you say you're going over here, but you go somewhere else, it's completely different. And the world's very dark, and it just really it's
People are just angrier now. Like back then, people were just like, you have like some crazy people, but now people are just like mad. So you have to be careful. And I worry every day about my daughters. I worry about my son too. Like, let's be honest, I worry about
yeah,
him.
yep,
It's like just your children, like,
right.
well, this was a really terrible case. This is
Mhm.
probably, for me, the worst case that I've done. I It was
Yeah,
horrible. It involved so much just disgusting, horrible awfulness and children and murder. And
just everything. I think it's just a big bucket of crap.
he was rotten as a child and he just
Mhm.
continued to be rotten. Like he was a bad seed. His family refused to talk about him and would not help authorities because they said, this isn't the son that I had. I'm like, yes, sir, it is. This was your son that at 13 was whipping out his penis and showing it to people. And you knew what he was like then, and you did nothing. And as this is happening, your daughter's husband doesn't even want him at the house. You all knew. You all knew what he was like, and you don't want your name sullied, so you wash your hands of it.
It's not how it won't happen like that nowadays. But that just shows you how much it's sad. How many victims have to occur, and that's in any aspect of life, have to occur for something for change.
Yeah.
And it's sad and it's disgusting, and it's, now we have these histories of people like you mentioned. He's still alive, but he's doing time in Oregon State Pen.
I'm gonna post a picture of his like most recent picture that I found. He's like smiling and jovial.
Of course he is.
He's just like, and he
What
looks
is he, like 70 in his 70s?
yeah. He looks like any. He looks like any like older guy who you would just see. Like that's why I say when I tell you like if they like ever released him, they can't, because I sincerely think that he would just, even as an old person,
Oh yeah.
commit another crime.
If he's trying to hit on the guards, of course. There's
Yeah.
no way. He can't be rehabilitated.
No.
No.
Well, on that note, thank you for joining us for episode 2. If you stuck through all of that horror and terribleness, thank you for that. And we look forward to hearing what you think about this. Have you, I feel like most people have heard of the I-5 killer, but did you know that he was a Green Bay Packer? Like, I didn't know that.
No.
I had no idea. So that was crazy. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe. We do have some more big cases coming.
Yes.
This is going to be sort of an intense season. I think we'll probably end it in November like we did this year.
Just for the holidays.
Yeah, it made it easy. We'll do the Halloween thing at the end of the year. Everybody seemed to really like that. It was fun. We'll do some more like spooky haunted stuff to cap off the season.
Aren't we going to the one in Ohio?
I would like to.
I think we should try to make that time when we're together.
I think that it's important that, after all of the horror of like the crimes that we talk about, that at the end we do some like, a little spooky stuff and just like lighten it up for the end of the
for fun
season. So.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. And until next time, please be safe and make good choices. So, see
yes,
you.
please.
Hello Kitty, me gusta mi tibis, me gusta mi booty, hoy me tomo selfie con filtro Hello Kitty.